Now, I keep saying this word forum, forum, forum. And I know Jimmy has been on stage and talked with you about it. I want to take a step back to just say, what is a forum? It has lots of different names. I'm sure if you're part of other organizations, you've heard some of these before. A mastermind, an inner circle, a pod, a circle, a team, a cohort, a brain trust, a dad band. Yes, I'm a part of a group that is all fathers who own businesses. So that's all they do is they're fathers who own businesses, and I help them run their forums. And what do they call their forums? Dad bands. And what do they call their meetings? Band practice. That's just their thing. The name you choose doesn't really matter. DLC has decided to go with forum. Great, that works. That is the universal term. If your group decides to call it an inner circle or a mastermind, so be it. But what matters is what it is. So what is a forum? A forum is a peer-to-peer accountability group that meets regularly over an extended period of time to help each other dream, build, and live the life they want to live. There's some key words here. Meets regularly, so there's a repetitive pattern. There is accountability in place. We're not just here to have fun and hang out. We're here to push each other and call each other out like, hey, Tom, you keep saying you're going to go to the gym, but your rings on your Apple Watch keep telling you you're not going to the gym. Clearly, there's a disconnect between what you're saying and what you're doing. And I want my group to call me out for that. And they meet over a regular period of time. Jimmy had mentioned before that some forums have met for extended period of time. I know a forum that signed a contract with each other that they were going to stay together no matter what for 30 years. And they committed to it, and they're now 17, and it'll be 18 years into this contract, and they're still in their group. They're still going. This group is the group that ends up staying with you through all the ups and downs of life. So what does this look like then? They meet monthly, there's a structured process, and there's accountability built into it. When I first got into my very first forum, I remember I came home, and that month in my business was a particularly challenging month. Like, it was not going well. And I remember talking to my wife at the time, and I said, oh my goodness, everything's a mess right now. The business is struggling so hard. Here's what I was saying. If I could write it out longer, it's a really tough month, but don't worry, I'm convinced we're going to get through it because I have some ideas for future things we're going to do. And this month in particular is challenging, but I know I'm going to figure this out because I always figure it out. Here's what my wife heard. We are going into bankruptcy. We should stop spending money and cancel all the credit cards and start foreclosing on the house because the business is over. That's what she heard. I realized that the ups and downs of my business is not what she wants to hear. I know that your spouse may not want to hear. I know some of you have spouses that are okay with hearing the ups and downs. My spouse is not. She's not okay with that. So I realized that there's this line here you see on the screen. I can't talk to her about the downside of the business because she translates it in a different way. So then I went to my business partner, and me and my wife were having a difficult time at home. And so I went to my business partner. I'm like, hey, before we start this meeting, I just want to let you know, like, I'm really frustrated right now. And I started going on about some of the challenges I'm having at home. And he stopped me mid-sentence. He's like, Tom, hold on. We have an investor meeting in 2 days that we have to get done. And I'm like, oh, right, wait, let's focus on that. And I realized my business partner doesn't want to hear about my personal challenges at home. And then lastly, I went out with my group of friends. And just by show, how many of you can relate to one of those first two experiences? Just raise your hand if you can relate to one of those first two experiences. All right, I see a bunch of hands going up. All right, so there's one more experience. I went out with a group of my friends for one of their birthdays. They all have corporate jobs, meaning they're a 9-to-5 type of job, and they don't have a business that they've built from scratch or that they're running. They're not the CEO or an executive. They're more mid-level management. And we're at this birthday party, having a great time. And I started chatting with 3 of them about my business. And I was telling them the things I'm working on. And I watched their faces have this glossy look over their eyes. And I realized, oh, right, they don't know what it's like to build something from nothing. They don't know what it's like to have to cover payroll with a credit card because money isn't coming in. And so they don't know what it's like to look at 0% interest and go, I found my solution for the next 3 months. They don't get any of that. And so I realized that I don't have a place in my life where I can talk about my business, my personal, and my family / community in one spot. The DLC forum is that spot. That is the place where you get to hone in and come in and talk about all 3 of this and then see what happens. I want to give you an example. I was working with this group and I was helping them coach their presentation. And the presenter was saying, oh, I'm having a really difficult time with staying focused at work. So my first thought was like, oh, this is a work situation. So let's hone in. And I start asking about the work. And I'm like, no, nothing, everything seems fine there. I said, hey, just out of curiosity, what time are you going to bed? And he says, oh my goodness, I don't fall asleep until 2 a.m. because I'm up so late. And I'm like, huh, well, that's interesting. Why are you up so late? My spouse and I are constantly arguing. Oh, why are you arguing? Because I have said that I am going to make sure that I put more effort into planning our vacations, and yet another vacation went by and I failed at it. I go, oh, that's interesting. So you're tired at work because you're staying awake till 2 a.m., because you're arguing with your spouse, because you're not taking care of responsibilities at home. So what we thought was a business issue is actually a family issue. And so now we come all the way back here. The only way we would have discovered that is if you have a place like a DLC forum. I want to give you some examples of some things we have gone through in our forum to give you some like ideas. We've gone through lawsuits with business partner, employee lawsuits, and feel free to nod your head if you know some of these, or you've experienced some of these, or you know someone. Addiction, death of a family member, death of a spouse, adoption of a child, weight loss, birth of a child, loss of a child during pregnancy, selling a business, buying a business, going bankrupt, divorce, marriage. By the way, one of my forum mates was my officiant at my wedding. How cool is that? Birth of twins, getting married. I mean, you can name it. We went through every possible situation within that forum. They are the ones that are with me through all the ups and downs. They sit with me on that nexus. And by the way, forums are not a brand new thing. I know DLC is a newer organization. However, the concept of forums, I mean, it goes way back. We can go back to the Knights of the Round Table and call that a forum. When a group of people come together to push each other to be a bigger, better version of themselves around a circular space, that's a forum. And there's lots of examples. Here are some other famous ones, by the way, in case you're curious. These are some other famous forums throughout history. One called the Vagabonds was Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, some other famous people there. The Inklings, C.S. Lewis, J.R.R. Tolkien from The Lord of the Rings, Sheryl Sandberg from the COO of Facebook. I believe she's still there. She created this whole lean in circle concept. Ben Franklin is part of one called the Junto, and then Sarah Blakely, who started Spanx, that famous company for women's undergarments. She is part of EO group there. Famous forums with uber successful people in it. And every forum comes down to 4 pillars. There's usually 4 guiding principles that work for all forums. And DLC forums has their own little flavor attached to it. And I'm going to talk through this while also adding in the DLC flavor to it so you get a sense. The very first one is confidentiality. What is said here stays here. It has to be a place of 100% confidentiality. There are 3 levels of confidentiality. Feel free to write these down because you will most likely have to encounter these at some point. The first level of confidentiality is level 1. This is just the default. What is said here stays here. I know here in the United States, we say what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. I don't know if you have a town in India that's the same concept, but what happens there stays there. Same idea. The second level, only with me around. Hey, look, I know we're all in the same forum. I'm going to share something with you right now, but I only want to talk about it when I'm here. I don't want you two to go off and have a conversation because it's kind of personal, and I'd rather be there to guide the conversation. So level 2 is only with me around. And then lastly, level 3 is the deepest, which is never again unless. So never again unless means I'm going to ask you to never bring this up unless I bring it up. These are for the most serious things. I want to give you an example of that. I was with someone for 14 years, married to them for 7. One day she woke up and said, I've never had an unhappy day with you. I'm just not in love with you anymore. The only reason I can say that right now with a straight face without tearing up is because I've worked through all the emotions of it. So I'm able to say that statement without tearing up and thinking about the whole situation because I've worked through it. But in the moment, the first 6 months after that, I was a wreck. I was destroyed. Anything that would come up that would trigger the emotions would just cause me to start tearing up. Because I had this locked in vision of my future with her in it, and it was just gone. It was gone. I couldn't even think of it anymore. So a couple weeks after it happened, that statement happened, I went to my forum. And obviously that was the biggest topic. But I was so vulnerable, so scared, so confused as to how to talk about this, that I told them, hey, this is level 3, meaning I want you to know that something very serious is going on, but if you start asking me questions, I'm just going to break apart. So give me time, give me space. I promise I'm going to come back to the group when I'm ready, but I want to let you know this is going on. And I shared the situation, and they said level 3, and they said, let us know when you're ready to talk again. That's what level 3 is. You have to ask for level 2 and level 3, but level 1 is the default. What's said here, stay here. Now, question for all of you, and I'm going to ask you to turn to that neighbor again, but this time only for 1 minute, okay? Because it's a quick one, so only 1 minute. Here's the question. The question is, you go to your forum meeting. You have an amazing experience. You spend 3-4 hours at the meeting. Then you go out to dinner. You have some drinks with your friends. You're laughing. You're having a great time. And you go home. And as soon as you get home, your spouse is right there. And your spouse turns towards you and says, honey, let me go back. Honey, how did your forum meeting go? Tell me everything. And because you have such a strong bond with your spouse, and you've committed to sharing your entire life with them, what are you gonna say? When I say go, turn to your neighbor and share for 1 minute what your answer to this question would be. Let's cue some music. Ready and go. All right, I'm gonna pause that timer. Who would be willing to go there with me and just share what you would say? Don't worry about being wrong or incorrect, because my guess is that most people are probably struggling with an answer to this. So just go for it. Be vulnerable, put yourself out there. What would you share?
I would ask her to go join her own forum.
That's an option. Stay tuned. DLC spousal forums coming soon. Right, Jimmy? All right, what else? What's another example? What else would you say?
I am Utpal Vaishnav, UV, and I own a software company called Upsquare Technologies. If any such event happens, then I would tell this to my wife, that let's talk about creation and taking over someone else's business rather than focusing on people who are not around.
Good. Interesting.
That's what happened 2 minutes ago. My wife sent me a WhatsApp message like, let's take over that person's business.
Let's take over that business. I love it. I love the support from the spouse. That's great.
Here's what I'm gonna tell my wife. I'll tell you if you give me your phone password.
I thought Jimmy wanted to bring disruption to the forum scenario. So probably DLC will have a rule where spouses are allowed to join the forum.
No, we have a separate spouse forum.
I'll prefer to communicate with her honestly and tell her the basic structure of forum, because this is not the last time I'm going to a forum. This will happen again and again. So I'll keep her in loop, tell her the basic understanding of the forum so that she understands it and respects it.
I love all of these answers. I'm going to add just a little bit more to it to kind of help us out, because I've been there. I know exactly what it's like to go have this amazing experience and then come home and be like, tell me everything. And I go, but forum confidentiality is like #1 rule. What do I do? Well, there's a couple things here. One is, what I realize with my spouse is that when I don't give answers, she will create her own answers that tend to be worse than what the reality is. So there's a little bit of demystifying the situation. And so I shared with her the structure. Here's what we mostly talk about, like in terms of the structure of the forum. Here's the group. Here's who's in it. She sees the LinkedIn. She understands the people. And then I know as a forum member, I always, and as a human, I can always share my story with anyone I want to, because it's my choice. It's my story, it's my experience, it's my reality. So meaning if I go to the group and I talk about wanting to lose weight and get stronger, I will talk to my wife about that, because that's about me. But if I'm in a forum with Jimmy and Jimmy goes, I really want to lose weight and get stronger and get that amazing summer body that I want, I can't talk to my wife about that, because that's Jimmy's story, not mine. So that's the first thing. Here's my second part of this. One day, and I'm going to give this to all of you as a challenge, because someone challenged me to do it. I had my monthly update, and it was printed out on a sheet of paper, because our group, we're not allowed to have any electronics. That's just what we do. So it was printed out. And one of my forum mates said, hey, Tom, I challenge you before the meeting to take your monthly update and give it to your spouse and let them read it. Because I made that face in that moment, and I started to sweat down my face, because my monthly update is so raw, so honest, so vulnerable, and so specific that I was like, oh, this is like my journal. I'm handing her my journal. And I said, you know what though? And this is just for me, there shouldn't be anything on here that's a surprise to her. Because if it's a surprise to her, that means there's some communication issues in our relationship and we're not being open in general. So I was like, I'm going to try this out. Now, again, I told you about the business stuff and how she translates it. So when I gave it to her, I said, hey, just want to let you know, I'm being extremely vulnerable right now in this moment. So be gentle. Please be gentle with what you read and respond to this. I gave it to her, and her response to reading it, it's like as if an entire weight dropped off of her, because she thought I was going to that meeting and just venting about our relationship, which was not at all the reality. In fact, there were sections in here that were all about the good things that were happening, about all the amazing things about her. And also, it was only one part of the entire part I was sharing. It completely changed her relationship to it, because I demystified what was going on. One more thing on this and we'll move on. The second part here is that there will be social events where your spouse will be there. And the awkward situation where you know that partnership is in trouble, but you now are meeting that spouse for the first time, it is not fair for you to interact with that spouse as if you know all this information, even though you know this information. So you have to interact, because remember, And anyone who's been to marriage counseling knows that there's this side of the story and this side of the story, and the reality and the truth is probably somewhere in here. And so we're only hearing this side of the story. So if we treat them as if we only hear this side of the story, that's not fair to that spouse. So that's something to think about with confidentiality. Before I move on past confidentiality, I was working with a forum, where one of the members got indicted for tax fraud. Huge issue. Government came down on this person. Everyone in the forum got subpoenaed, meaning they got asked to come to court and record an official statement about this person and their business dealings. Does the idea of what's said here, stay here, hold true in that space? Quickly, yeah, give me a nod yes or a shake no. Let's see what you think. All right, I'm seeing a lot of shake no's. There is no spousal privilege in forum. There is no client privilege in forum. We are not above the law, meaning you need to talk to your own lawyer and make a decision as to what you're going to do, because legally that's another level. That's not spousal. We don't get spousal or client privileges there. So we've covered confidentiality. Before I move on, quickly, I'm just going to ask you to turn to the person next to you and just share with them your reaction to confidentiality within a forum. Does this make sense to you? Why would this be a benefit to the value of forum? And if you're in a forum now, why is it a benefit? Quickly share. We're just going to do 1 minute of sharing, all right? And we won't do large group response back. So 1 minute of sharing, put that music on, and we'll come right back afterwards. Ready? And go. The second major pillar of forum is vulnerability. Now, vulnerability comes in all sorts of different ways. I've already talked about it several times, but let me give one example here. Let's imagine for a moment that I'm in a forum, and Jimmy, you're the only person I see there that I know the name of. So I'm just going to use you as an example. So imagine Jimmy and I are in a forum together, and we both are talking about struggling with paying payroll. Now, in my company, I have 3 employees, full-time employees. Jimmy has 30,000 employees. And so when Jimmy says he can't pay payroll and I say I can't pay payroll, even though the phrase is exactly the same, the number is completely different. And so for me, I can't pay payroll. Maybe it's short by 15,000 US dollars, whereas Jimmy, it's 150,000 US dollars. Big difference. So that when we talk about vulnerability, the first thing we talk about is being specific instead of general. Because when we're general, we say, oh, I can't pay payroll, it doesn't help each other out. And it is a lot more vulnerable to say, I can't pay payroll by $15,000. Or here's another example. My partner and I have not been intimate with each other for 6 months versus my partner and I haven't been intimate. There's a big difference there. And so that becomes part of this vulnerability. The 3 responses back from vulnerability, the 3 things that a forum gains are these 3 things here. The first one is it builds trust with each other. It strengthens the relationship between the members, and it releases pressure. When I was going through that divorce, I remember everything that would trigger me and cause me to just tear up and start crying. And I realized that if I didn't share it with my forum, it stayed inside of me. And anyone who's gone through a traumatic experience or a very difficult experience knows what it's like to have sort of that person inside of your body punching at your stomach, or that voice inside your head that just keeps talking to you. And that voice rarely says the nice stuff because it knows exactly what to say to trigger me to have the worst possible reaction. I remember I was at a conference once, and I was speaking in front of the group, and in the front row, someone's cell phone had gone off, And the ringtone on the cell phone was the same song as our wedding dance song. And I was like, oh, because I felt it, like it triggered me in that moment. Now, the topic of that keynote was about goal setting and accountability. So I started tearing up. There were about 700 people in the room, so not everyone could see me, but I get that front row must have thought I was so passionate about accountability and goal setting because I was tearing up as I'm talking about it. I realized that with my group, whenever I'd keep something in, it manifested in a way that was not healthy. So, by the way, if you're going through something right now, just really quickly, the process to go through it is acknowledge the feeling, feel the feeling, and then let it go. That process of rinse and repeat over and over and over again, it will keep happening. It needs to keep happening. But at some point, the space between the triggers gets further and further apart. And then eventually you'll be able to go back to the thing that was triggering you. And now it won't be as triggering because you've processed the emotion in a really healthy way. Forums allow you to do that because the process for forum goes, I am angry right now. Here's why I'm angry. Da 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 da. I'm acknowledging the feeling. I'm letting the feeling feel the feeling, and then afterwards I let it go and I move on and I come back next month and I'm like, I'm not as angry anymore, but now I'm sad. And then you can go through the process. Builds trust, strengthen relationship, and release pressure. If we were there in person right now, or if I were there with you in person right now, I'd have you all circle up into small groups and I would challenge you to an activity. And we're gonna try this out here, okay? I'm not gonna ask you to circle up. I'm gonna ask you to, though, get into groups of, I believe it looks like maybe you have about 3 or 4 people sitting in each row. So your row is going to be your group. The person who is born the furthest from the room you're in right now gets to start. Okay, so think about maybe that's you. If that's you, born the furthest from the room you're in right now gets to start. Ideally, you have groups of about 3, 4, or 5 people. Here's the setup for this. If you knew that I was born on a farm, you would know me better. If you knew that both of my parents have doctoral degrees, you know me better. If you knew that my dad struggles with Parkinson's that he's had for the past 15 years, you know me better. If you knew that I am obsessed with peanut butter, you'd know me better. If you knew that I once was on a reality show on TV, you'd know me better. If you knew that I once, when I was 8 years old, tried to cut my own hair, but cut it so badly that I pretended to be sick for an entire week of school because I was that embarrassed, you know me better. If you knew that I got LASIK in my eyes 3 years ago, you'd know me better. If you knew that I can fluently speak German, you'd know me better. If you knew that I am married and have a stepdaughter, you'd know me better. If you knew I played soccer growing up, you'd know me better. If you knew I was obsessed with the Chicago Bulls basketball team and Michael Jordan, you would know me better. If you knew that I once became a vegetarian, or I became a vegetarian because of Lisa Simpson on the TV show The Simpsons, you'd know me better. If you knew I once dyed my hair bright orange by accident, you'd know me better. If you knew that my wardrobe, my clothing, my closet only has 5 colors, black, white, gray, purple, and pink, you'd know me better. If you knew that I would eat the exact same thing every day and wouldn't care, you'd know me better. If you knew that I played basketball growing up, you'd know me better. If you knew that my uncle died of liver failure from alcoholism, you'd know me better. If you knew I once tried to start a peanut butter festival in New York City called the New York City Peanut Butter Jam, you'd know me better. If you knew that I decided not to do that festival because the cost for insurance for allergies from peanut butter is ridiculous, you know me better. If you know I own 50 domains that I resell, and I recently resold one for $3,000 US dollars, you know me better. If you knew that one of my brothers struggles desperately with depression, you know me better. If you knew that I stopped drinking many years ago because I didn't need it anymore and didn't feel like I wanted it, you know me better. If you knew I didn't drink any caffeine my entire childhood, all the way through university and even post-university, you'd know me better. And lastly, if you knew I've traveled to 52 different countries, you'd know me better. These are a few things. If you knew about me, you'd know me better. But what about you? In just a moment, I'm going to challenge you to turn with a group of 4 or 5 people. The person who is born furthest from this room gets to start by sharing. If you knew that, you'd know me better. And you're going to share a headline. Don't share the entire story. Just share the headline with that person and then move on. The trick is, don't let it stop on you. There's a game in the US called hot potato. Hot potato is this idea that you never want to be the one holding the potato. You always want to keep passing it. So you never want to let it sit on you. So if it gets to you and you can't think of anything, go with the most basic thing. If you knew I ate bread with jam for breakfast, you'd know me better. If you knew I took a shower last night, you'd know me better. Don't let it sit on you. Keep it moving. Lastly, you notice how I shared at really high level stuff and very deep. Share at the level you feel comfortable. Only share at the level you feel comfortable. So feel free to go up and down and right and left. If someone says something funny, it's okay to laugh. If someone says something serious, you can acknowledge them, say thank you for sharing, but keep it moving, keep it moving. We're gonna do this as a group. Your group of 4 or 5 people are gonna do this. Your challenge is to do it for 3 minutes. Keep it moving, keep it moving. So find that group of 3, turn your chairs if you need to, or move your body so you can hear each other. Person born furthest from the room, ready, and go. Every time I do that activity, a few things happen. One is people realize that they're not alone. They realize that, oh, look, someone else has gone through something that I'm going through. I thought I was the only one. The second thing is they learn new things about each other that they didn't know about each other. The third thing is they release some of that pressure, some of that tension that's inside, because maybe this is the first time they've said that thing to another group of people that they can trust. And then there's also usually some laughter, some smiling, some caring. All of that plays into vulnerability in this activity. Your forum is that space. Your forum is that space to release that pressure. Your forum is that space to find out, oh, I'm not the only one. The number of times I get to the end of a meeting and I go, wow, look at this. Like, I thought I was the only one dealing with this type of issue, but look at all these high-powered A players who are struggling with this type of information or challenge. So I'm not the only one. So now we have covered confidentiality and vulnerability. So let's move on to the third pillar here, which is, maybe it's going to show up, all in. Within DLC, the other ways to say this with all in are proactive learning and investing in each other. A players want to hang out with A players. B and C players want to hang out with A players. But A players do not want to hang out with B and C players. All in and investing in each other is all about everyone pushing each other to be A players. Jimmy was on stage earlier talking about the idea of showing up late to a forum. And there's a couple ways to think about it. Be like, I know every time I'm thinking about I might be late for this forum, I think about the fact and go, is my time really worth more than 8 other people's time? And Jimmy gave the right calculation, because it's not just 10 minutes, it's actually 80 minutes of wasted time for me. Am I really that much more important? Am I really that much more busy than my A players? It's also a sign of respect/disrespect for showing up late. Some groups make the person who show up late pay for the first round at dinner. Some groups give a fine or a penalty for showing up late. Other groups, I heard this one group, if I show up late, I don't have to pay the fine. Everyone else in the group pays the fine, as a reminder to me of how disrespectful it is to not show up on time. So when we say all in, we mean all in. You go for it. Forums typically have 3 parts. It's called the rule of thirds. 1/3 of that time is spent talking about the past 30 days. What happened over the past 30 days? Another part of that time is spent talking about the future, what's going to happen in the next 30 days. And then the last third is about what's happening right now, troubleshooting issues that are going on. So starting with the past, this, one of the best ways we do that within Forum is this thing called a monthly update. There are lots of different forms for this monthly update. In DLC forums, there is a template. This is an example of a template, but they typically cover these 1, 2, or 3 areas. And I love that DLC is adding in happiness into this as a barometer. You may, if by the way, if happiness doesn't work for you, call it joy, call it inner peace, whatever you're choosing the word, but that overall sort of sentiment of how I'm feeling about my life in this right now. Career, family, friends, and self. What's a high point? What's a low point? High point meaning something that went really well, low point, something that didn't work out very well. This monthly update here, I will admit that sometimes I fill this out on the train ride to the meeting or the taxi ride to the meeting. And I put in 1 word or 2 words or 3 words in front of each one. I'll admit that. That's not going all in. That's not being an A player. That's me just showing up and playing not to lose. The best value of this monthly update is not you taking you sharing it with the group. That's not the real value. The real value of this monthly update is forcing you to spend a period of time in between the meetings once a month to think about, what did happen over the past 30 days? And how do I feel about that? And then reflecting on it. My group, and feel free to take this, my group challenges us. Every so often, the moderator will he'll call out that we have to pass our monthly update to the person next to us. And the person next to us is going to read our monthly update. Because if they can read it to the group, that means that I have spent the time filling this out in a way that really took the time to reflect on what happened over the past 30 days. So that's a challenge my group does. Feel free to try it out in your group, because those days when I don't fill it out, or those months when I don't fill it out well and it's just 1 word or 2 words, I can see why I'm not putting the effort in. I'm not going all in. And again, DLC forums call it investing in each other and proactive learning. This monthly update, you'll see here, it has 3 sections, highs and lows, based on each section. But this monthly update, if you were filling it out, only put 1 sentence about what it is and then spend the rest of the time about why it matters. So for example, if you told me you got a puppy and you put that in there, I got a puppy. Congratulations. I'm so excited for you that you got a puppy. Now, why does that matter? Well, at first, like when I hear you got a puppy, I'm like, does that really deserve to be on your monthly update? Is that really that important? And then you start sharing the why. And then I read, and then you say the why. You go, oh, well, because as a child, my dad said to me that only successful people buy puppies. And once you buy a puppy, that's a sign that you've made it in life. And I've always wanted to show my dad I can make it in life. So I bought that puppy. Now, all of a sudden, that puppy has a lot more meaning. Going back to the 3 bricklayers, don't tell me you're laying bricks. Make that one sentence. I laid bricks today. Okay, why? And then spend the rest of the time on the why it matters, because that's really where monthly updates get so valuable. When I'm my best self, I typically spend about 20 to 30 minutes filling this out each month. When I'm my best self, I'll admit I don't always spend that time. Life gets in the way, but when I'm my best self, it's typically 20 to 30 minutes. So now we have covered confidentiality, vulnerability, all in, and then the last one is mindset. Within DLC forums, they call this the abundance mindset, the beginner mindset, the new mindset. There's other phrase, fixed mindset versus growth mindset. How are you thinking about your mindset in terms of forums? I have worked with groups where I come in and I say something and the person across the table from me has their arms crossed and I say it and they go, nope, impossible, that won't work. And anytime I face someone with that kind of fixed mindset, I know that they're not going to work within forum. Because forum has to be a place where we open up our brains, our minds, our hearts to the possibility that maybe there's something we can learn from this. You know, maybe there's something we can do within their saying. And why that matters is because I read this book called, and here's the title, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a, and I'll just let that last part be. Nod your head, actually, sorry, raise your hand if you've heard of this book before. Okay, so several of you have. The title alone was a huge turnoff for me. I was not excited to read this book because of the title. I will admit, I loved the book. I thought it was great. Mark has an amazing ability to take the concepts and make them very simple. I really like the book. But there's one part of the book I want to highlight here. And I'm going to put it up on the screen. It goes like this. It goes, let's see. There is no correct dogma or perfect ideology. There is only what your experience has shown you to be right for you. And even then, that experience is probably somewhat wrong too. Because you and I and everyone else all have our differing needs and personal histories and life circumstances. We all inevitably come to different correct answers about what our life means and how they should be lived. How does that show up in forum? Well, there's 2 parts to it. If I tell you what you should do, really what I'm doing is I'm using all of my past history, both the good and the bad, and projecting it onto you and saying, this is what you should do now. So forums tend to be a place where we don't tell people what they should do. We tend to only share our own experience because of everything that this paragraph just said here. I know that I'm going to share, here's what worked for me, da, 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 da. And another reason for this, imagine if Jimmy and I were in a forum again and Jimmy came with a challenge and I said, Jimmy, you know what you got to do? Jimmy, you definitely need to go and fire that client. They are a horrible client. They're not worth your time. Jimmy goes back to his business, fires that client. That client tells 6 other clients and they all drop Jimmy as a client. Now Jimmy's business is failing. Jimmy comes back to the forum, is like, WTF, Tom, my entire business is failing. Your advice was horrible. There is now friction between Jimmy and I within our forum, and not good friction, not like accountability, pushing to a bigger, better version. There's friction because I told him what to do, he did it, and it ruined his business. Okay, let's take another option. I say the exact same thing to Jimmy. Jimmy goes home, fires that client, and the client, he fires that client, and that frees up 6 hours of Jimmy's time where he gets on a client that is 3 times as valuable and successful. And so that sounds like a great opportunity. He comes back to the forum like, Tom, that advice was amazing. Thank you so much. Okay, that sounds good. So let's keep that for a moment and go to the last option. I tell Jimmy to fire that client. He goes home. He does not fire that client. But then that client causes all sorts of headache, causes a lawsuit within his company. Now he's dealing with a lawsuit from this client. He should have fired it, comes back to the meeting, and I go, well, Jimmy, I told you should have fired that client. Now there's friction. So let's go back to that middle one. He does it. I tell him what to do. He does it. It's successful. And now that's it. It sounds really good. But the problem is that I didn't really help Jimmy to have proactive learning. I didn't really help Jimmy to have the growth mindset. All I did in that moment was tell Jimmy, hey, bring your problem to me. I'm going to tell you what to do and I'm going to solve it for you. That works in a consulting agency. That works when I hire someone to come into my company and guide the company. That does not work when we're peers. All that's going to do is train Jimmy to bring his problems to us and not figure out how to solve his own issues. I always like to say in forum, we're helping you to sharpen your sword to slay your own dragon. Because we're only together for 3 or 4 hours, but you're together with yourself 24 hours a day. You have to be able to figure this out on your own. I'm going to tell you what worked for me, and you're going to filter it through your experiences and say, yes, I'm going to try that out, and then come back and say, you know what, here's what I did, here's what I didn't do, and here's what I learned from it. That's what abundance mindset is. That's what growth mindset is. And that's also what proactive learning is within the forum experience. So we have now covered all 4 pillars of forum. I'm going to challenge you to turn to the person next to you and quickly go through. I'm going to give you, you and your partner 1 minute only, just 1 minute, to go through all 4 and rank them for importance for you. Which one's the most important for you? And then go down. I know they're all important, but if you had to rank them, because you know how sometimes values conflict. I always tell companies when I work with them to create their values, I say after you create the values, you have to rank them, because there will be times when values interact. Like, for example, let's say one of your values in your company is reduce costs, or it's like something like that, like save money. That's one of your values. And then another value is care for the customer. And so your frontline employee is looking at these 2 values, reduce cost, care for the customer, and the customer is asking for help. That requires some financial need. You're like, which one do I do? Do I reduce costs or do I care for the customer? If there's not a value ranking in place, your employee is not sure which one to do. And then they go ask you, hey, which one should I do? And then you tell them. They need to have that value ranking. So I'm going to challenge you, value rank these 4 pillars with your partner. I'm actually going to go for 90 seconds because it's a bit more of a challenging question. So with that 90 seconds on the screen, find that partner, ready, and go. All right, come on, back to the screen. I would love to open up large group. By the way, there is no wrong answer here because every forum is going to rank them a little bit different. So what did you and your partner, how did you rank these 4? Let's hear some examples from the audience as to how you ranked them. And again, there's no wrong answer. So you're just going to share how you ranked them and then feel free to share why you chose to rank them that way. Who in their group has an example they'd be willing to share?
Hey, hi, this is Shankar here.
Nice to meet you.
We discussed and we felt confidentiality, of course, is the most important one. Mindset was the second. And between all-in and vulnerability, we felt they're more or less at par and can be interchangeable.
Cool. All right. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate it. Let's go another one. Who else has one? Thank you.
Hi Tom, nice to meet you. So thank you. So my group and we've discussed and we've decided all in number 1, mindset number 2, and confidentiality and vulnerability we could interchange.
Interesting. I love it. I love the diversity already in terms of number 1, number 2, number 3, 4. Who else has one?
Yeah, Hi, UV again. So I would put mindset first because when you have the right mindset, you are going to keep things confidential. You are going to have appropriate amount of vulnerability, and you are going to go all in. So for me, the correct mindset or the appropriate mindset, it's not only strategy but execution in breakfast.
I like that. Interesting. Interesting. Is there? We have another one. Yeah.
Yes. Hi, Tom. This is Bhushan here. In our group, I think 4 of us had 4 different views about. So I think everybody was having their own things, but confidentiality and all in was above the vulnerability and mindset. But at the end, how do you build the trust in the forum? That was, we were looking at something on that lines also. So I think all 4 we were quite confused in the group.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Sometimes, 4 different people have 4 different opinions on this. It's a great activity, by the way, for forums to do.
Hi, Tom. Firstly, I want to thank you because the way you put it up was amazing. These 4 pillars couldn't have been explained better before. And with this, we all discussed, but one of the things for one of our member fields, as everybody's saying, confidentiality is more important. And for me and other people, we feel mindset comes first for me because it helps us think from different perspective. And as rightly said by Bhushan also, I agree with him that because of the mindset, it helps us to become more vulnerable, to share things and hence get more confident about each other and have things confidential kept. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That was wonderful. And again, there's no wrong answer here. We have one more, I believe.
Yeah, hi Tom. It was amazing to see what you presented. For me, it was the first time that I got to know about these 4 pillars and their importance in forming a forum. So for us, again, the views were very different. For me, it was confidentiality, the first one. The second one was all in, and the other 2 were at par. I think all in is also, it covers the whole thing, and it all depends also in situations. So that's what we discussed.
Every forum I work with ranks them in different ways. There is no one correct answer here. And Jimmy was mentioning this on stage before, and I'm going to add a little more flavor to this. Here in the United States, I'm sure you're familiar, like it's called the United States, meaning there's 50 states and we have a constitution that kind of overrides all of the states, but each individual state is different. I live in New York. New York is completely different than Texas, which is completely different than California. And there's a reason why politically there's so many fights, because we are so different. Every state is different. I think Texas wants to be its own country every year. I think they always want to be their own country. These forums are a little bit like that, meaning Jimmy and DLC forums are going to have a structure for you. Here's your base structure. This is your constitution that seems to work pretty well for most forums. But once you get into your group, you need to tweak and adjust it to work for your 6 to 10 people that are in your group. That's why I always say forums are their own individual state with an overriding constitution from the organization and DLC in this case. So you have these 4 pillars. I want to thank you all for sharing that. We just have a couple more things. And by the way, we're going to have a whole section on questions. So I'm going to precursor you to say, if you have questions, get ready, because we're going to spend some time on that. But I want to cover just a few more things here before we get to those questions and close out. So let me see if I can bring the next slide up here. I talked before about this rule of thirds. And remember, I told you there's the past, the future, and then right now. On the past, remember, that's that monthly update. One thing I did not mention about making this monthly update amazing are these 5 reminders that are across the top here. I always challenge people on this monthly update, go deep. Share the thing that you're not necessarily sharing anywhere else. The second one is be specific. This is my example with Jimmy in terms of payroll. Put a number in there. Don't just say I can't pay payroll. Also, don't just say I feel unhealthy. Say I haven't gone to the gym for 30 days. That puts a number to it. Next one, why over what? Remember I told you the story of why You bought a puppy. Good job. I'm so excited for you. Why does that puppy matter? Oh, now I get it. Prioritize the order. In the DLC forum format, everyone only gets a couple minutes to be able to share their update. So some people actually run out of time to be able to share everything. So if you come to the meeting and on this document you say, I bought a puppy, I only want, but then down below it says, and I lost my biggest client, my company's going bankrupt. You better share that up top as the first thing, unless that puppy is like a life-changing, world-altering thing for you. Then by all means, tell me about that puppy, and then you can tell me about how you lost your biggest client, your company's going bankrupt, and now you're gonna have to foreclose on your home. Okay, but you tell me about that puppy. And then lastly, I already talked about this, the prep is the real value. The real value is how much time you put into it in between prepping it for the meeting, because sharing it at the meeting is not the real value. All right, moving on. So we're gonna go then, the next is remember the past, the future, right now. We've already talked about the past, so now the future. The future is all about goal setting and accountability. When I set forums up for the first time, we run them through this thing called the Wheel of Life. And the Wheel of Life has 10 different areas where we ask the people to rate themselves. Right now, in this moment, how would you rate yourself on personal growth, contribution, fun and adventure, romance, family, friends and social health, fitness, career, and spiritual/purpose. So those of you who are religious might be able to attach that. If you're not religious, you can just say purpose, like why am I here? What am I building? What's my legacy? You know, I've been thinking a lot about the difference between career versus legacy. And so that would fall under there. And if you were to rate yourself then, in each of these areas on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate yourself? Before we go on, I actually want to do that activity with this group right now, with the partner next to you. If you've been talking to 3 people, group up in groups of 3. If you've only been talking to 2 people, group up in that group of 2. Give yourself a rating, 1 to 10 for each one of these, and then just very quickly say why. Each person is going to get 2 minutes to go through this, which is very fast. So I'm going to put on the clock 4 minutes. But but pay attention so that each person doesn't have more than 2 minutes, okay? All right, thank you for sharing with your partner. I want to let you all know that my group does this every single year. The Wheel of Life rating every single year at our forum retreat. So you have a rating each area. My group does this every year. I challenge your group to do this every year so that you have this visual year over year of what your life has been like at that moment. So that's the last part. And then we move on. One more section is of the rule of thirds and the present, or right now. And so the last part is right now. This is where we troubleshoot. This is where Jimmy comes to the meeting and we decide to work with Jimmy and talk with him. In the DLC forums, there's this idea of continuous learning, proactive learning. And we often can do this in several different ways. I want to give you some examples of what going deep or proactive learning might look like. Because most of us are, if you're in a forum right now, you're most familiar with this experience share, which means here's my challenge, and then you all give me some experience around it. That's normal. Here are some other ones that come up, is the debate format. The debate format is where we divide the group into 2, because I am struggling between option A and option B in my life. And so option A and option B, I'm going to divide the group up and have you 2 debate which option is the better option. That's another way to do it. Another way to go deep is to role play. Let's say I need to fire my key executive employee or key executive, and I'm struggling with how to do that. You can actually role play that within the forum. Have someone pretend to be that key executive and talk it out so that you go through the conversation. Here's another one, brainstorm. I just need to come up with a ton of marketing ideas for this new initiative I have. Or I need to come up with a ton of ideas on how to create an amazing vacation for my family. 2 more, roundtable. This is where I don't come in with a specific challenge, but we all collectively talk about a topic. I want to give you an example. My group, everyone brought their LinkedIn accounts to the group, and we pulled it up on the screen one by one, and we did an audit, meaning we looked at each other's LinkedIn and suggested ways to make it better. Or another time, we all brought in our balance sheets and reviewed them together. Or another time, we all brought in how we all wake up in the morning and make the most of the morning. That's what a roundtable discussion would be like. And then lastly is the expert. This is where DLC has an amazing network where they're going to help you bring people in to do learnings within your forum, to continuously learn, to be a proactive learner. And so that will show up there as well.